Welcome back to Ribbon Candy Hooking. I'm Deanna. Today I'm answering a question I get often, which is, can I hook with felt? And by felt, I think we're either talking about the craft felt that you find in most big box craft stores, or even the really high-end felt that's like all wool felt that you get in online stores and in some of the higher end shops. So I want to answer the question, can I hook with felt? I want to show you what happens when we hook with felt. So let's do this together. The answer is it's not super advisable. I would not advise hooking a whole piece out of felt, and I'm going to show you why. If we come down here, I've just got a piece of felt from the craft store that I was cutting out stuff for the kids or making some little thing. I'm just going to cut it with my scissors to get started. This is about a number size 8 cut, about 1/4 of an inch thick, right? Just freestyling it. And I'm working in burlap here, which is the loosest of the backings, right? So if I have any chance of using a sort of, this isn't the super thick felt, right? This is the really crafty, rafty one from the cheap store. But if it has any chance of working, it'll be in a big open weaved background like burlap. So I'm just hooking it. I have beginner videos on how to hook. I'm hooking it into the burlap like I would hook anything. It's coming up actually remarkably well. I'm kind of talking myself out of the idea that it's not great to work with. It does look a little bit different than, for example, regular wool wood. There's a tongue twister. Let me come over to the side here. I think the main concern if you're hooking with felt is, number one, it might break. It might break while you're hooking, right? Because it is not a woven. It's not a fabric. It does have potential to break. So you want to be sure that if you are going to hook it, you're putting it into a backing that is appropriate for it, right? The tightest backings are rug warp 100% cotton, monk's cloth 100% cotton, and then linen and burlap are the looser. So let me do one that's a little bit wider. The thing about felt is it doesn't have any give. So we are going to pull up, whether we want to or not, a sequence of loops that are quite structured. Where they bend and kind of wrinkle, it is going to remain bent and wrinkled, right? Because this is not wool. If this is from the really cheapy store, this is going to be 100% synthetic. It does hook okay, I have to say. It hooks better than I thought. I would not want to hook this into a tighter backing like rugwarp or monk's cloth. But it's not hooking badly. Even with a wide strip like this, it's fairly comfortable to hook with. It's going to be a little bit hard on my hand when it gets very, very thick. Let's try one more experiment. It is a little bit harder to hook with my hand in terms of like how my wrist and my problem places feel. It's a little bit harder than it would be with wool. It doesn't have much give because it's not stretchy, right? It's made this way. So the thing that worries me the most is what I said, that number one, it loses its shape quickly. So once it's in, it's in. It would probably be a bit of a pig's breakfast if you hook it and then undo it. Let's say I wanted to hook something a little bit fine. Let's see if that's gonna work. And again, this is a nice loose backing, so it might work. I'm gonna do a kind of a brutal experiment with it. It definitely doesn't pull your loops through as neatly or cleanly as, for example, wool or something stretchy like sweater material or t-shirt material. It is much more inclined, with a thinner cut, it is much more inclined to want to fall back out. Because it's not actually a fabric, right? It's not a fabric like wool is actually a fabric. Wool is all fluffy and dense and lofty. And when you pull a wool strip through, it kind of fattens itself up like a teardrop, right? And most of the loop is on the top. It gets pinched at the base, at the root, and that's what holds it in place. But because felt is not a fabric with stretch, it's not indeed a fabric, it doesn't want to do that. It's much more likely with a thinner strip to want to come out, which leaves me in a situation, and this is just kind of analytical, leaves me in a situation where it is better to work with felt with a wider cut so that it doesn't come out. It is much more difficult. I'm having a lot more trouble working with felt. I'm just seeing if it rips. Yeah, see, it can rip quite easily. That took very little for it to rip. The thinner strips are a bit more dangerous to work with for that reason. You could easily pull just a little too hard and it could rip. And you see how just in terms of practice, I'm just doing a diagonal here, they really do want to come out more easily. I think if you really do want to work with felt, craft store felt that is synthetic, you do want to, and you do want to work with thinner strips, right? Because you're thinking about your hand and how much more difficult it is to pull something through that's quite large, right, through the backing. I would say if you're working with the thinner strips and that's what you want to do, then work with a different backing than burlap, because these are very inclined to come back out. I never say that with rug hooking, because we know that there are rugs from like the 1860s and those aren't coming out. But felt is not a super desirable material to work with because it has no stretch. It never sort of reshapes itself. Like wool has a memory, right? It has a memory with heat. It has a memory to the way that it's formed, right? You can get it to do things because it's a more sophisticated fabric. Felt, very, very simple. It's just a question of pulling it, having it stay there. I think, in short, as far as working with felt, you can see that it's possible. Is it a pleasure? It's not such a pleasure. Not so much as working with, for example, wool or knits or t-shirts or something like that. Even like pantyhose, I think, are nicer to work with than felt. It's very rigid, and it's not going to surprise you by doing some nice lofty little turns and making attractive looking twists. It's not going to do that because it's not that kind of a fiber. Alternately, this is another material from the craft store that might be interesting. This is just fleece, right? This is the micro fleece, polar fleece, whatever you want to call it. This is a solid piece that I must have been using to make the kids, like, they dictate what kinds of stuffed animals they want me to make, and we get all this crazy fleece. But this is another not fabric, right? So it has the potential to rip, but it's not going to rip. It's all of the fibers that make up polar fleece or any kind of fleece, they are very, very tightly, knit is the wrong word because they aren't officially knit, right? But it could rip the same way as felt, but felt is not as dense, and it's not as the way that it's sort of engineered is not interlocking, right? Whereas with fleece, it is a bit more sturdy. And it also has a bit of stretch. So this is a much more interesting fiber for me. If you're looking for stuff that's a bit more economical to hook with, and you're thinking about felt versus fleece, I definitely go with fleece. Fleece is much more similar and much more in the family of wool because of the stretch, because of the flexibility, because of the loftiness. When I'm pulling this through, even a wider strip like this, you can see when I'm pulling it through, you can see how it's bigger than the root of itself, right? The hole that it's going through, it's bigger than that, and it holds really, really well. There's no question that I'm going to accidentally pull, and it's going to come undone. Having said that, let's look at a more narrow piece. Let's make this into a more narrow piece and see how that performs. Just in terms of integrity, the fact that I was able to rip the felt with absolutely no effort at all. I mean, I basically gave it like a nasty look, and it ripped itself in half. This is not going to happen with the polar fleece. This is a thinner cut. This is a quite thin cut. This is maybe like number 5, maybe number 6, kind of a width. Still working really well. And I have to say, I'm pulling back on it a little bit to see if it wants to play me, and it doesn't. Because it is a stretchy material, it does not, it stretches, it fills the hole that you're pulling it through, and it just wants to sit there and hang out, and it doesn't want to come back through. Whereas these guys, they do want to come back through, right? You're going to have to pack them well on the sides and make sure that they are quite large for their holes, right? Something like this I would be worried about. Something like this I would not be worried about. Something like this I'm right on the fence. But with the polar fleece in its infinite stretchiness, right, that goes in there really well. Now this is another synthetic material, so it's not like you're going to want to block it with steam or try to mellow out the overall look of your piece afterward as you might with wool, trying to level out your loops, right, and give it a more uniform look. You're not going to be able to do that with this material. It wouldn't be good to apply heat to it because it's synthetic. And if you do want to try, test it, because there's lots of brands of polar fleece and micro fleece. But it works a heck of a lot better, and it is very inexpensive, the fleece. And there are way more colors than there are with the felt anyway. You tend to get them at the same kinds of stores, the big box stores. And in addition, the polar fleece has infinite patterns, doesn't it? Lots of different colors. So it would function as kind of an alternate to using some kind of mottled or hand-dyed wool, which would be much more expensive, infinitely more expensive. Now, do I personally like the look of wool more? Absolutely I do. But does this work for rug hooking? It definitely works for rug hooking. It's a lot of fun. It's another thing that you can look for in a thrift store too, or if your kids or grandkids have outgrown clothing, cut up their fleece stuff too and hook with that as well. So, sorry, there was a little coughing episode there. So in short, wasn't that short, both of these things will hook, and everything basically hooks. Plastic bags cut up, trash bags hook, cut up balloons hook, everything hooks. The question is, how difficult is it to hook? Is it worth it? What does it look like when it is hooked, right? Is that going to be worth it? So you can hook with any fiber that will stay in. But in my mind, the felt, I would use it for small areas. If I really, really loved the color or some aspect, some quality of it, if I really loved something about it, I would use it. I wouldn't use it for a whole piece because it just doesn't have much of a unique look to it, and it's not very easy to work with. It isn't expensive, but so are a lot of other things like cut up t-shirts. The polar fleece, on the other hand, I think has legs, right? There's a lot of patterns, there's a lot of colors, it's very easy to use. So they're both possible to use. It just becomes a question of what do you have? What do you already have that you're sitting on in your stash? And if you want to use it up, both of these fabrics will absolutely work. I think that you would become very tired of hooking an entire piece, particularly a large piece, with just felt. I would go for something else, but that is just my opinion. You might as well try it, and if you like it or love it, leave a comment, let me know. I love to be wrong. I love to be wrong. I just tell you what my preferences are and demonstrate things for you. So both of these things work. If you find some more interesting things that work, let me know and we'll do some more crazy videos. Thumbs up, like, subscribe, all of those things so I can find you again. And I will see you next time at Ribbon Candy Hooking.